Welcome back to Night Journals. I'm Vastine East, and we are recording Renaissance number 2. The Renaissance. We talked about it for a few moments in Renaissance 1. It's necessary. It's necessary. Why is it so necessary? It's because we become stagnated. Cultures become stagnant. Things just change. And every generation they have their own ideas. And it's a beautiful thing to see them embrace, respect the past, but at the same time, follow their own muse. And I'm happy today, or wherever you may be when you're listening to this particular podcast. Again, you may be driving along the Pacific Coast Highway. You may be enjoying great seafood in Seattle. You may be in New York, Miami, wherever you are right now, whether it's daylight or darkness. We're Night Journals. And you may be snuggled up in bed right now reading a book while listening to this podcast. You may be driving home from work. You may be headed to work now. But thanks for taking me along with you. Thank you. You may be riding a subway. Thank you for taking me along. If you paid any attention to the graphic that beautifully displays this podcast, you'll notice that it is a night scene. The sky is filled with stars. There are very few clouds in the sky. There are trees to the right and to the left as you peer and look upwards into the night sky. The trees are darkened. They seem so solemn. But one thing you'll notice when you peer through the trees and you see the stars, the constellations, you'll notice something that is out of place, or seemingly out of place. My graphic designer, she did a beautiful job of putting the graphic together. The rainbow. A rainbow in the dark. A rainbow in the dark. You know, we oftentimes, when we think about a rainbow, of course, they occur after a shower or whatever, and whatever rays of sun during the day is what gives it life. You know, the sunlight hits certain elements in the atmosphere, and you have these beautiful colors. Some of the most beautiful rainbows occur after the worst storms. But here we have a rainbow displayed against a night sky. I believe that's where a lot of people are right now. Pain and problems sometimes are the worst hours, the darkest hours. But I remember reading something once about the ancient Egyptians. They did not see darkness as evil or anything that was grotesque or out of place. They saw darkness as a unique thing. They said, this is where you actually find yourself. This is where man actually finds God. That 1 a.m. in the morning, between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the darkest of the night, I'm told is when most creative thoughts take birth. It's in the darkest hour. And I believe, because I've been there, I've experienced it for myself, it is in the darkest hour where you have no friends around, or you may be in the same room with your spouse or whatever, but you are alone in the dark. It is in darkness where we actually find our way sometimes. And I want to just talk about this for a moment, because we're supporting Renaissance. Because if people are going to find themselves prepared to become those next visionaries for the future, and they're in darkness, I want them to know that there is hope. I'm going to tell you why. I like Westerns. I love the Westerns. Adventure movies, especially the Westerns, more so than adventurous type dramas. It seems that more people get lost in sunlight than they do in the darkness. It's like an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense. How do you get lost in daylight and find your way in darkness? Well, it's quite simple. The universe is moving. Everything is in motion. But the sun, we see it dance across the sky because of the Earth rotation. And sometimes I remember the movie The Edge with Anthony Hopkins, and they were being chased by a grizzly bear, but they couldn't quite figure out, and they're traveling in the daytime, and they got lost in the daytime. But what's amazing is that in the nighttime, you can always depend on the North Star to be where it's supposed to be. You can always depend on the Dog Star. All the various constellations are there at night. And I believe that's the beauty when you're going through a hard time. When you're going through a time when you can't seem to figure your way out, just look for the stars. They're there. The real direction is in the dark. And that rainbow is symbolic of God's promise to the world that it would never rain again, never flood again, rather, of that magnitude. But can you see the beauty in embracing and learning from the rough moments in your life? Because it's amazing, some of the greatest inventions, the greatest leaders who led the European Renaissance, some of them were killed. They suffered greatly. But look what their sacrifices did for the world at large. Okay, you're having a moment right now. It's dark. Things are dark in your life right now. But if you would find your star, that's where the stars are born. I'm always amazed when I hear of people who have achieved great successes in the arts, entertainment, sports, politics, business, education, whatever walks of life. Even being a welder, some people were burned severely, and all of a sudden they thought their careers were over, but they were burned by fire, but they became great welders. I know I've seen such men who worked in construction and industry. It's amazing. But think about that rainbow. There it is, cast against a dark sky. When the whole world is looking at you and they say, oh boy, you're going through a rough period right now, shame on you or whatever, but they can't see what you see. I'm always amazed how people that are born and it seems like they were dealt an unfair advantage in life by having a missing limb, or they were blind or born blind or they're crippled, and yet they become the greatest musicians in the world. Artists, scientists, educators, politicians, businessmen. They didn't allow themselves to be entrapped by the darkness. They found their rainbow. And I believe when you find your rainbow, you have found your Renaissance. You're not the same anymore. You want to share it with the world. You want to give it away. You want to help. You want to see someone else enjoy what you enjoy. You see, I believe people who embrace rainbows in the dark and find their renaissance, they excel beyond happiness. They have something called joy. Joy is such a beautiful word. Joy. And I think joy is greater than happiness, because joy it's so internalized. Happiness oftentimes is because of something external, but joy is your soul. You know, I think about David, the psalmist. You know, he was a bad boy. He got himself in trouble. And of course, we know the story when he had a child out of wedlock with another man's wife, and the baby died tragically. But the good book tells us that David danced when he knew he'd gotten his reprieve from God. David had joy. That's the kind of joy I'm talking about. The kind of joy when you've given the world a great idea, a scientific achievement, you've helped someone militarily, you've done something great. Joy. That's your renaissance. No, we'll never have that type of renaissance, I don't think, ever again, like the Europeans had. But I think we can have our own renaissances in our own personal lives. We can have better families. And those of you that are in school, you can have a renaissance in your school. You just have to have a change of mind as teachers, as students. Embrace the impossibilities. I'm going to stop being a nuisance to someone else. I'm going to let them enjoy their life. A renaissance. You can become someone's rainbow. You can become someone's rainbow when you know that they're having a hard time. You can step in and you can become the difference between their eyes and the dark sky. You can become their rainbow. Rainbow builds the renaissance. And renaissance are wrapped in a beautiful ribbon called a rainbow. We can all do this together. We can all work together. And we can have this new renaissance. We can have our own personal renaissances every day. In your job, in your school, in your homes, in your community. You can have your own say in this world. You can leave your mark, your legacy, a rainbow. Thank you for taking time and listening to this podcast. Thank you for allowing me to know there's someone out there that's embracing these thoughts. I'm not a perfect person. I mean, I have my faults, but I have my own rainbow that I embrace. I embrace my renaissance. I'm trying to give something back. My renaissance. You all take care. We'll get back together soon. Bye-bye.